Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. With the 14-day ceasefire set to expire soon, U.S. President Donald Trump says the chances of extending it beyond Wednesday evening are very small. He offered mixed messages, saying he was in no rush to end the conflict, but also expressing confidence that further negotiations with Iran will soon take place in Pakistan. Meanwhile, Iran has yet to make a final decision on whether to take part in a new round of peace talks with the U.S. and Pakistan. But a senior Iranian official has reportedly said that discussions are being considered to help end a U.S. blockade of Iranian ports, a key obstacle to renewed negotiations. South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung met with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and agreed to strengthen cooperation on stable supply of energy resources and naphtha amid increasing global uncertainties. Conflicting signals from both Washington and Tehran are casting doubt over last-ditch diplomatic efforts to avert a wider conflict as the deadline for the ceasefire approaches. Our Moon Yeon starts us off.
With a two-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran set to expire Wednesday evening, diplomatic hopes are pinned on a second round of peace talks in Islamabad, Pakistan, seen by many as the final opportunity to prevent a return to a full-scale war. Throughout Monday, however, U.S. President Donald Trump delivered a series of conflicting updates on the talks. In an interview with the New York Post, he claimed Vice President J.D. Vance was already on his way to Pakistan, but U.S. officials later clarified that Vance remained in Washington and is expected to depart Tuesday. Speaking to Bloomberg News, Trump also hardened his stance, saying the chances of extending the ceasefire beyond Wednesday evening are very small. While expressing optimism on social media that a deal could come quickly, he warned that lots of bombs would follow if no agreement is reached. At the center of the standoff is the Strait of Hormuz. Tensions peaked Sunday when the U.S. Navy seized the Tusker, an Iranian cargo ship attempting to evade the blockade. By Monday, the U.S. military confirmed it had turned back 27 vessels bound for Iranian ports. The disruption has pushed Brent crude towards $100 a barrel, a concern Trump brushed aside, insisting prices would come roaring down if Iran complies. As the deadline approaches, Washington says its blockade will remain in place until a deal is reached, while Iran has warned it could retaliate over the ship's seizure. With more than 3,000 reported casualties in Iran and fighting still active in Lebanon, the Islamabad talks remain a narrow and rapidly closing window for peace. Moon Yeon, Arirang News.
Iran is considering whether to join a new round of peace talks with the United States and Pakistan as a fragile ceasefire nears its expiration. But Tehran says ongoing U.S. violations and deep mistrust remain major obstacles to returning to negotiations. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Iran is weighing whether to take part in a new round of peace talks with the United States and Pakistan as diplomatic efforts intensify to resolve the ongoing conflict and ease tensions in global energy markets. A senior Iranian official told Reuters on Monday that discussions are being considered following steps by Islamabad to help end a U.S. blockade of Iranian ports, a key obstacle to renewed negotiations. However, Tehran has yet to make a final decision. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said continued U.S. ceasefire violations remain a major barrier to moving forward with diplomacy. In a phone call with his Pakistani counterpart on Monday, Araghchi emphasized that Iran is still reviewing its options and has not determined its next steps. The uncertainty comes as a fragile two-week ceasefire in a conflict that has killed thousands and disrupted the global economy is set to expire later this week. At the same time, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is expected to travel to Islamabad on Tuesday, according to U.S. officials, signaling Washington's intent to keep negotiations on track. While Iran has not publicly committed to attending the talks, two senior Iranian officials indicated that Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf would participate if Vance is present, suggesting a possible pathway for renewed engagement. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian underscored the deep mistrust between Tehran and Washington, warning that meaningful dialogue depends on honoring commitments. In a social media post on Monday, he said Iran remains wary of what he described as contradictory signals from U.S. officials, adding that Iranians would not yield to pressure as talks approach. However, the Iranian president earlier this month signaled in an open letter that he is open to swiftly pursuing a diplomatic resolution, stressing that the outcome will shape the future for generations to come. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Over in New Delhi, President Lee Jae-myung has met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and discussed cooperation on supplies of energy resources and naphtha amid increasing global uncertainties. Our Yoon Jung-min is traveling with the president and files his report from New Delhi.
The South Korean first couple were given a grand welcome by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Draupadi Murmu. South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung and his Indian counterpart Modi stressed the importance of bilateral cooperation during these turbulent times.
불확실성의 시대 속에서 대한민국과 인도가 상호 성장과 혁신을 촉진하는 최적의 전방위적 협력 파트너가 될 수 있다는 데 서로 공감하였습니다.
Our two countries share common visions in the Indo-Pacific region. Your visit, Mr. President, has elevated our trusted bilateral partnership to one that looks toward the future.
The leaders also exchanged views on regional and global peace amid the current conflict in the Middle East.
우리는 최근 중동 정세에 대한 의견을 교환하며 중동 지역의 안정과 평화 회복이 세계 안보와 경제에 매우 중요하다는 데 공감하였습니다.
Amid heightened international tensions, South Korea and India are sending a concerted message of peace and stability.
Monday's summit yielded key deliverables such as strengthening cooperation on a stable supply of energy resources and naphtha. The leaders agreed to create the Korea-India Industrial Cooperation Committee for cooperation on strategic sectors such as critical minerals and nuclear energy. Also, the two countries plan to upgrade their bilateral economic agreement called CEPA and double their annual trade volume to $50 billion by 2030. Both plan to work together on a host of other areas.
디지털 브릿지 프레임워크를 통해 인공지능 인재 강국인 인도와 세계적 수준의 인공지능 인프라를 갖춘 대한민국 간의 인공지능 디지털 협력 기반을 구축해 나갈 것입니다.
From encouraging exchanges between young talents to cooperation in shipbuilding, environment, and energy, we will expand opportunities to cooperate in a range of fields.
A Mumbai Korea Center will be established to foster cultural exchanges.
The talks came at a critical time as South Korea tries to expand its diplomatic horizon to the global south. President Lee's next stop is Vietnam, where he will be sitting down with the nation's top leader. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, New Delhi.
So boosting economic cooperation was a key focus of yesterday's summit between President Lee Jae-myung and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. That focus continued later in the day with a series of business events. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
President Lee Jae-myung, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and Samsung Electronics Chairman Lee Jae-yong all in one frame. The selfie taken with the Galaxy Z Flip 7 made at Samsung's Noida factory in India has drawn attention as a snapshot of the growing economic partnership between South Korea and India. A business delegation of around 200 people accompanied President Lee's state visit to India. The strong focus on business even reshaped diplomatic protocol.
The original plan was to hold the Korea-India Business Dialogue ahead of the Korea-India Business Forum, but Prime Minister Modi proposed that business leaders join his lunch with President Xi, and we accepted.
According to the policy chief, talks focused on broadening cooperation beyond traditional sectors such as automobiles and electronics into other industries like shipbuilding and steel. President Lee reinforced that message later in the day at the Korea-India Business Forum.
세계적 수준인 인도의 인공지능 소프트웨어 역량과 한국의 반도체, 배터리, 자동차 조선 등 제조 경쟁력이 결합되면 양국은 막대한 시너지를 낼 수 있을 것입니다.
Calling for a step up in economic cooperation between Seoul and New Delhi, Yi reiterated the goal of doubling bilateral trade to $50 billion a year by 2030. Annual trade between the two countries has hovered around $25 billion in recent years, a level the president said falls short given India's emergence as one of the world's largest economies. To that end, the two countries plan to resume the 12th round of negotiations next month to upgrade their comprehensive economic partnership agreement, aiming to reach a deal by the first half of 2027.
Addressing several non-tariff barriers, making it easier to do business between the two countries, easing the rules of origin, expanding market access, and opening up the doors in both countries.
A total of 20 memorandums of understanding were signed between businesses from the two countries at Monday's forum. One of the key deals involves HD Korea Shipbuilding and Offshore Engineering developing a new shipyard in India. 송유진, Arirang News.
And now for a closer look at the summit between South Korea's President Lee and India's Prime Minister Modi. We're joined today by Professor Shin Sang-yup, professor at the Graduate School of International Studies at Kyung-hee University. Professor Shin, thanks for coming on today.
Well, thanks for having me today.
So what do you make of yesterday's summit between President Lee and Prime Minister Modi?
I think it will be a kind of turning point or stepping stone for two countries to step up. I mean, the deepening and widening the economic relations between two countries. According to the report, it was already well known that the two leaders discussed about the various issues to step up the economic cooperative relations between two countries. And I think it will be a kind of some stepping stone, oriented to seek for the more productive and the more efficient economic cooperative relations between the two countries.
Right, and the Yi administration has been emphasizing global South diplomacy. Why is India such a key diplomatic partner for South Korea?
Well, actually, the India has a very big potential as a market. India has a 1.46 billion population, which is the largest in the world. At the same time, India is the great economic power, leads global production and the supply chain. So I think if we could have the step up the cooperative relations with India, we can have a very big market, pioneer new market in the world, which is very important because considering the economic uncertainty, economic crisis caused by the war between Israel and the U.S. and Iran, and also the Ukraine and Russia war. Considering all of these, certainly for us to strengthen the cooperative relations with India, which is very important to pioneer new market, and it will be very, very beneficial for Korean economy and the Indian economy as well.
I see, and a large business delegation is accompanying President Lee on this trip, including the heads of companies like Samsung, LG, and Hyundai. And you just talked about India's population. What makes India such an attractive market for Korean firms, and what are these companies hoping to achieve through this visit?
Well, actually, in 2015, two countries signed the Strategic Economic Partnership. But since 2015, we cannot say that the relations between two countries could not be developed enough. I think by having the more cooperative relations between two countries, certainly we can develop we can have the mutually beneficial economic relations. And as President already talked about, for example, we can have the cooperative relations in a very important and very various areas, such as shipbuilding industry, AI industry, and the energy areas and the defense areas. So certainly we can widening and deepening the cooperative relations between two countries by seeking for future-oriented economic relations between two countries.
Mm-hmm. Right, and President Lee Jae-myung's next stop will be Vietnam, where he'll be the first state guest under the country's new leadership. What does the timing of this visit signal, and what are President Lee's main objectives in talks with the Vietnamese leader?
Well, certainly, I think we can say that the President Lee's state visit to Vietnam is also seeking for economic relations, economic benefits through the strengthening economic ties with Vietnam. Well, in fact, the economic ties with Vietnam has developed very well over the last decades. Well, I did not say this one, but when I talked about the economic ties with India, well, only 600, 700 Korean companies entered in India, but about 10,000 Korean companies are operating inside the Vietnam. And so we can say that there are much, by having a future-oriented talks with the Vietnamese leaders, we can strengthen our corporate relations in new areas such as the nuclear energy and the supply chain and energy security. By having widening the corporate relations with Vietnam, certainly we can have more, and we can continuously have more economic the outcomes, achievements in the corporate relations with Vietnamese government.
Right, we'll have to see how the summit plays out in Vietnam. All right, Professor Shin, thank you so much for coming on today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
South Korea's newly appointed Bank of Korea Governor, Shin Hyun-sung, says the central bank will implement a flexible monetary policy to combat growing economic uncertainties. In his inaugural address on Tuesday, the new governor emphasized that the domestic economy faces dual pressures of inflation and slowing growth, exacerbated by the Middle East conflict and volatile global oil prices. He outlined 4 core objectives for his 4-year term: stabilizing prices and financial markets, expanding financial monitoring into non-bank sectors, internationalizing the Korean won through a 24-hour foreign exchange market, and taking an active role in national structural reforms. The governor added that the central bank will also push forward with digital currency initiatives, including Project Hangang, to secure a stable next-generation payment infrastructure. Meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi has sent a ritual offering to Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo to coincide with the shrine's annual Spring Festival. Citing an anonymous source, Japan's Kyoto Shimbun newspaper on Tuesday said Takaichi is considering refraining from visiting the shrine in person during the festival period, which runs through April 23rd. Japanese local media say the move appears to be aimed at minimizing diplomatic friction, as a visit by the Prime Minister to the Yasukuni Shrine could spark backlash from South Korea and China. The Yasukuni Shrine commemorates about 2.46 million Japanese war dead, including 14 Class A war criminals convicted by international tribunals for their roles in World War II.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is the World Now. With the U.S.-Iran ceasefire set to expire, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that Israel has not yet finished its task in Iran, even as a second round of Israel-Lebanon talks is scheduled for Thursday in Washington. Netanyahu made the remarks on Monday during a Memorial Day ceremony in Jerusalem as the United States prepared to resume negotiations in Pakistan. Iran has said that Washington was insisting on unreasonable and unrealistic positions, leaving the next round of talks uncertain. On the Lebanon front, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will host Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors on Thursday for their second face-to-face meeting. Apple announced on Monday that Tim Cook will step down as CEO on September the 1st. Hardware engineering chief John Ternus has been named as his successor. Under Cook's 15-year reign, Apple has grown from a $350 billion company into a $4 trillion global powerhouse. Its annual revenue has nearly quadrupled, and its stock has soared more than 20-fold. Ternus, age 50, is the same age Cook was when he took over from Steve Jobs. He joined Apple in the year 2001 and has driven the development of the Mac, iPad, AirPods, and the recently launched iPhone Air. Tim Cook will move into the role of executive chairman and continue his engaging with policymakers. In Mexico, a gunman on Monday shot dead one tourist and wounded 4 others at Mexico's ancient Teotihuacan pyramids. He then killed himself atop one of the structures. The tourist killed was from Canada. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said she contacted the Canadian embassy directly. 2 of the wounded were Colombian, 1 Canadian, and 1 Russian. The incident comes as Mexico prepares to co-host the 2026 FIFA World Cup, with global scrutiny focused on tourist security. Japan has warned of a heightened risk of a megaquake in the coming days after a magnitude 7.7 earthquake struck off Japan's northeastern coast on Monday afternoon. Officials put the probability of a magnitude 8 or stronger quake at roughly 10 times the normal level for the coming week. Monday's earthquake triggered tsunami warnings and evacuation orders for thousands of coastal residents before authorities downgraded the warning. Tsunami waves of up to 80 centimeters were detected, but no immediate casualties or major damage were reported.
Korea is dealing with the worst dust storm of the spring so far. A surge of dense yellow dust rolled in overnight on cold northwesterly winds, and air quality alerts have been issued across much of the country. And for most regions, conditions will stay very bad throughout the day today, so make sure to have a dust mask when heading outdoors. Wash your hands frequently and drink plenty of water even if you don't feel thirsty. Today has surely brought a dramatic shift in the weather conditions. After recent early summer-like temperatures, some inland regions are under a cold wave advisory, which is the latest to be issued on record. But temperatures will recover nicely this afternoon. For a closer look, Seoul will be getting up to 19 degrees Celsius, but dry weather alerts are being issued in the capital area. Daegu and Gyeongju will make it to 23 degrees Celsius. Well, it looks like no major rain is in the forecast for now, so dust and dry conditions may linger. So please keep the jacket and the mask handy.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.